Now, we're going to have a look at what the newspapers are talking about today, because obviously an awful lot of coverage in the newspapers of events from yesterday and events of today here in France. The 75th anniversary of D-Day really dominating papers right around the world. Dipty's joining us here on set.
Right, so let's start with the French papers, and we can show you Le Figaro, their front page, which they're going with the morning of freedom, going with a picture actually by famed war photographer Robert Capa. Overlord will be remembered for its, quote, exceptional nature and the determined spirit to triumph over Nazi Germany. La Presse de la Manche, that's a local paper in France. They're publishing that incredible picture of the 97-year-old U.S. war vet paratrooper Tom Rice, who relived the moment when he was dropped behind. Picture. Yeah, fabulous picture. He was dropped behind enemy lines in 1944. Well, he jumped again yesterday. Once again, thank you, the paper says, not just to men like Tom Rice, but all those who gave their effort and some of them their lives to free the Allied forces. Elsewhere, West France, another local paper in France, says, today's a day for us to be grateful for being able to live freely. Let's never forget the sacrifice of men and women in 1944. It's our duty to remember.
You found a piece in Le Parisien taking a little bit more of a political angle, something we alluded to just a few moments ago. The commemoration of a united Allied operation, ironically, at a time of tension between a lot of these leaders that we've been seeing meeting over the last day.
That's right, and these leaders will be essentially putting aside those tensions for a day. But it does come at a moment when the world is incredibly conflicted. Donald Trump's divisive politics, you've got Brexit, you've got the environment, immigration, the rise of the far right. The world is really conflicted. Le Parisien says World War II soldiers thought they were freeing the world from evil in 1945. Now these vets would be right in thinking that the world has actually regressed on all fronts. What happened during the war forged bonds between Allied forces, and at least for Le Parisien's editors, those bonds are blood ties now, and they're stronger than any kind of division that could separate them today. D-Day was called the longest day, but there's one cartoonist in Le Parisien Rançon who says it'll be the longest day for Donald Trump and Emmanuel Macron. Former, their romance is clearly over, and both of them will be hoping that the longest day will end very quickly so they don't have to deal with each other today. So
hopefully not too many tweets. Yeah. That's what we can probably think about that. D-Day was, of course, a momentous turning point as far as the Allies were concerned in the Second World War. For the Russians, though, obviously they had far other things on their mind, obviously, other than D-Day, and had for many months.
That's right, and not many Russian papers are talking about it today, but Sputnik did publish this article really on the back of the comments from the spokeswoman for the Russian Foreign Ministry yesterday, who warned the West not to, quote, exaggerate the importance of D-Day and condemned the catastrophic rewriting of history. Sputnik is a media outlet very close to the Russian government, so you have to take this, have to bear that in mind when you read this article. But they do remind us that, quote, the Russians tied up 228 Nazi divisions on the Eastern Front, whereas only 11 divisions were defending the Normandy beaches on D-Day. Operation Bagration, the name of the Red Army's June 1944 offensive, saw 300,000 Nazis killed as opposed to 4,000 in Overlord. Furthermore, the paper says that the West sees World War II as a continuation of World War I and a war among old rivals. But for Russia, it was a, quote, mortal struggle for their very survival. Whether you agree with that or not is a different question.
And does highlight, doesn't it, as the editors of the New York Times are pointing out, how collective memories tend to take different forms depending, of course, which country you're seeing it from.
And that's really apparent on D-Day. Even within the Allied forces, D-Day is seen differently. For instance, the Times says the French, their gratitude to their saviors is tempered by efforts to play up the role of the French resistance in D-Day. For the Germans, D-Day has become a day that upon which it was a day of new beginnings, really. It began a new process of rehabilitation from its Nazi past. And this is exactly what one writer from Bild, a German tabloid, says. The writer saying D-Day is, quote, the largest and most generous gift known in world history, a chance to stop the murderous Germans and allow a return to civilization. we should, quote, bow in gratitude at their unconditional belief in freedom. And in fact, there's a British cartoonist, Steve Bell, who hasn't forgotten the efforts of the Red Army in his cartoon today. He pays tribute to the Russians with this cartoon. You have a Russian soldier saying, "Here you are. Don't forget us again." But it is also obviously a commemoration of D-Day. Allied forces. Gary Varvel, an American cartoonist, does pay tribute to those Allied forces. There you see a very poignant cartoon, thousands of whom were essentially walking to their graves on June the 6th, 1944.
Very poignant, lots of very poignant reports, of course, in the newspapers. Thanks very much to Tika Laurent joining us.